and welcome to another chapter of reading. As you can tell, I got my new frames, and I guess this means I'm in my Cabot era. Those who know SVU get it. But for those of you who came for Potter, and that's probably all of you, let's begin, shall we? Chapter 17, A Sluggish Memory. Feels so good to actually read that. Late in the afternoon, a few days after New Year, Harry, Ron, and Ginny lined up beside the kitchen fire to return to Hogwarts. The Ministry had arranged this one-off connection to the Flu Network to return students quickly and safely to the school. Only Mrs. Weasley was there to say goodbye, as Mr. Weasley, Fred, George, Bill, and Fleur were all at work. Mrs. Weasley dissolved into tears at the moment of parting. Admittedly, it took very little to set her off lately. She had been crying on and off ever since Percy had stormed from the house on Christmas Day with his glasses splattered with mashed parsnip, for which Fred, George, and Ginny all claimed credit. Mashed parsnip. Can't say I never had a parsnip, but I imagine that's delicious. I don't really know, because, again, I never tried a parsnip before. If you ever tried a parsnip, let me know how they taste in the comments. Don't cry, Mum, said Ginny, patting her on the back as Mrs. Weasley sobbed into her shoulder. It's okay. Yeah, don't worry about us, said Ron, permitting his mother to plant a very wet kiss on his cheek. What about Percy? He's a brat. It's not really lost, is it? Mrs. Weasley sobbed harder than ever as she enfolded Harry in her arms. Promise me you'll look after yourself. Stay out of trouble. I wish to, Mrs. Weasley, said Harry. I like a quiet life. You know me. This reminds me of the quote, I don't go looking for trouble. Trouble usually finds me, from the films. She gave a watery chuckle and stood back. Be good then, all of you. Harry stepped into the emerald fire and shouted, Hogwarts! He had one last fleeting view of the Weasleys' kitchen, and Mrs. Weasley's tearful face before the flames engulfed him. Spinning very fast, he caught blurred glimpses of other wizarding rooms, which were whipped out of sight before he could get a proper look. Then he was slowing down, finally stopping squarely in the fireplace in Professor McGonagall's office. She barely glanced up from her work as he clambered out over the grate. Evening, Potter. Try not to get too much ash on the carpet. No, Professor. Harry straightened his glasses and flattened his hair as Ron came spinning into view. When Ginny had arrived, all three of them trooped out of McGonagall's office and off toward Gryffindor Tower. Harry glanced out of the corridor windows as they passed. The sun was already sinking over grounds covered in deeper snow than over the Burrow Garden. In the distance, he could see Hagrid feeding Buckbeak in front of his cabin. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but it is getting, like, sunsetty here. I'll try to show you. Hang on. There's the sunset. Well, kind of sunset. Not quite, but it's still sunsetty. Bubbles, said Ron confidently when they reached the fat lady who was looking paler than usual and winced at his loud voice. No, she said. What do you mean, no? This new password, she said, and please don't shout. Oh, away. How are we supposed to... Harry! Ginny! Hermione was hurrying toward them, very pink-faced and wearing a cloak, hat, and gloves. I got back a couple of hours ago. I've just been down to visit Hagrid and Witherwings. she said breathlessly. Did you have a good Christmas? Yeah, said Ron at once. Pretty eventful. Rufus Grim. I've got something for you, Harry, said Hermione, neither looking at Ron nor giving any sign that she heard him. Oh, hang on. Password. Abstinence. Precisely, said the fat lady in a feeble voice, and swung forward to reveal the portrait. What's up with her? Asked Harry. Overindulged over Christmas, apparently, said Hermione, rolling her eyes as she led the way into the packed common room. She and her friend by the drink their way all through the wine in that picture of the drunk monks down by the trunks corridor. Anyway, she rummaged in her pocket for a moment, then pulled out a scroll of parchment with Dumbledore's writing on it. Right, said Harry, unrolling it at once to discover that his next lesson with Dumbledore was scheduled for the following night. Got those to tell him. And you. Let's sit down. But at that moment there was a loud squeal of, One! And Lavender Brown came hurtling out of nowhere and flung herself into Ron's arms. Several onlookers snickered. Hermione gave a tinkling laugh and said, There's a table over here. Coming, Ginny? No thanks. I said I'd meet Dean, said Ginny, though Harry could not help noticing that she did not sound very enthusiastic. Leaving Ron and Lavender locked in a kind of vertical wrestling match, Harry led Hermione over to the spare table. So, how was your Christmas? Oh, fine, she shrugged. Nothing special. How was it at Lon-Lon's? I'll tell you in a minute, said Harry. Look, Hermione, can't you? No, I can't, she said flatly. Don't even ask. I thought maybe, over Christmas. Was it that lady who drank about a 500-year-old wine, Harry? Not me. So it was this important news that you wanted to tell me. She looked too fierce to argue with at that moment, so Harry dropped the subject of Ron and recounted all that he had overheard between Malfoy and Snape. When he had finished, Hermione said, and thought for a moment, and then said, Don't you think... Hang on, I'm not quite used to these new glasses yet. Okay, that's a little better. He was pretending to offer help so that he could trick Malfoy into telling him what he's doing. Well, yes, said Hermione. Mom, Dad, and Lupin think so, said Harry grudgingly. But this definitely proves Malfoy's planning something. You can't deny that. No, I can't, she answered slowly. And he's acting on Voldemort's orders, just like I said. I'm still not used to these glasses. Did either of them actually mention Voldemort's name? Harry frowned, trying to remember. Not sure. Snape definitely said your master. And who else would that be? I don't know, said Hermione, biting her lip. Maybe his father? She stared across the room, apparently lost in thought, not even noticing Lavender tickling Ron. How's Lupin? Oh, right, said Harry, and he told her all about Lupin's mission among the werewolves and the difficulties he was facing. Have you heard of the Fenrir Greyback? Yes, I have, said Hermione, sounding startled. And so have you, Harry. When? History of Magic? You know full well I never listened. Oh, Harry, we love you anyway. No, not History of Magic. Malfoy threatened bargain with him, said Hermione. back in Nocturne Alley. Don't you remember? He told Borkin that Greyback was an old family friend, and that he'd be checking up on Borkin's progress. Harry gaped at her. I forgot! If this proves Malfoy's executive, how else could he be in contact with Greyback and tell him what to do? That's pretty suspicious, breathed Hermione. Unless... Oh, come on, said Harry in exasperation. You can't get around this one. Well, there is the possibility it was an empty threat. Unbelievable you are, said Harry, shaking his head. We'll see who's right. You'll be eating your words, Hermione. Just like the Ministry. Oh yeah, had a word with Rufus Grimjaw as well. And the rest of the evening passed amicably, with both of them oppressing the Ministry of Magic. For Hermione, like Ron, thought that after all the Ministry had put Harry through the previous year, they had a great deal of nerve asking him for help now. And they really do. Still not used to these classes yet. The new term started next morning with a pleasant surprise for the sixth years. A large sign had been pinned to the common room notice boards overnight. Apparitions lessons. If you are 17 years of age or will turn 17 on or before the 31st of August next, you are eligible for a 12-week course of apparition lessons from a Ministry of Magic apparition instructor. Please sign below if you'd like to participate. Cost 10 galleons. Not used to these classes yet. Harry and Ron joined the crowd that was jostling around the notice and taking it in turns to write their names at the bottom. Ron was just taking out his quill to sign after Hermione when Lavender crept up behind him, swept her hands over his eyes, and trilled. Not used to these glasses yet. Okay, that's not what I went to trilled, but I'm not used to these glasses yet. I'm really not. Here's what she actually trilled. Guess who Ron won? Harry turned to see Hermione stalking off. He caught up with her, having no wish to stay behind with Ron and Lavender. But to his surprise, Ron caught up with them a little way beyond the portrait hole, with his ears bright red and his expression disgruntled. Without a word, Hermione sped up to lock with Neville. So, apparition, said Ron, his tone making it perfectly plain that Harry was not to mention what was happening. Should be enough, eh? Not used to it yet. I know, said Harry. Maybe it's better when you do it yourself. I didn't enjoy it much when Dumbledore took me along for the ride. You know, I feel like in this chapter this is going to be a running gag. I'm not used to these yet. I forgot if I would have done it. I'd better pass my test first time, said Ron, looking anxious. Even George did. Tony failed though, didn't he? Yeah, but Tony's better than me. Ron held his arms out from his body as though he was a gorilla. So Fred and George didn't go on about it much. What's his face anyway? When can we take the actual test? Where's the 17? That's only March for me. For me, that was 4 Februaries ago. be able to operate in here, in the castle. Not the point, is it? Everyone would, know I could operate if I wanted. Ron was not the only one to be excited about the prospect of operation. All that day there was much talk about the forthcoming lessons. A great deal of store was being said by being able to vanish and reappear at will. How cool would it be when we can just... Seamus clicked his fingers to indicate disappearance. My cousin Fergus does it just to annoy me. He wait till I can do that. We'll never have another peaceful moment. You know, I could like to call apparition being a Cheshire cat. And I pull this on some of my family members and friends. Like, I can be within their sights for a moment, and then I'll just like wander off momentarily and then come back and there we go. There you are. I call that being a Cheshire cat. So, on that note, I kind of wonder if I mastered apparition. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you master apparition? Lost in visions of this happy prospect, he flicked his wand a little too enthusiastically, so that it was producing the fountain of pure water that was the object of today's charms. He let out a hose-like jet that ricocheted off the ceiling and knocked Professor Flitwick flat on his face. That sounds actually rather refreshing for this weather, though. Not sure about January, though. Harry's already operated. Ron told it a slightly abashed Seamus after Professor Flitwick had dried himself off with the weight of his wand and set Seamus' lines. I am a wizard, not a baboon brandishing a stick. Someone took it. Decided on apparition, you know. Whoa, whispered Seamus, and he, Dean, and Neville put their heads a little closer to hear what apparition felt like. For the rest of the day, Harry was besieged with requests from the other Sixers to describe the sensation of apparition. All of them seemed odd, rather than throb, when he told them how uncomfortable it was. And he was still answering detailed questions at 10 to 8 that evening, when he was forced to lie and say that he needed to return a book to the library so as to escape in time for his lesson with Dumbledore. The lamps in Dumbledore's office were lit. The portraits of previous headmasters were showing gently in their frames, and the Pattinson was ready upon the desk once more. Dumbledore's hands lay on either side of it, the right windows blocking the front looking as ever. It did not seem to have healed at all, and Harry wondered, perhaps for the 100th time, what caused such a distinctive injury, but did not ask. Dumbledore said that he would know eventually, and there was, in any case, another subject he wanted to discuss. But before Harry could say anything about Snape and Malfoy, Dumbledore spoke. I hear that you met the Minister of Magic over Christmas. Yes, said Harry. He's not very happy with me. No, sighed Dumbledore. He's not very happy with me either. You must try not to sing beneath our English hair, but that's wrong. Good advice, Dumbledore. Good advice. Harry grinned. He wanted me to tell the wizarding community that the Ministry's doing a wonderful job. Dumbledore smiled. It was... Okay, wrong voices. Sorry. He wanted me to tell the wizarding community that the Ministry's doing a wonderful job. There's Harry's voice for you. Again, I'm sorry for the wrong voice initially. Dumbledore smiled. It was much as I told him, you know. During his last days in office, when he was trying desperately to cling to his post, he sought immunity, hoping hoping that you would give me your support. After everything Fudge did last year, said Harry angrily. After Umbridge. I told Cornelius that there was no chance of it, but the idea did not die when he left office. Within hours of Gryffindor's appointment, we met and he demanded that I arrange a meeting with you. So that's why you argued, Harry blurted out. Listen to the prophet. The prophet is bound to report the truth occasionally, said Dumbledore, if only accidentally. Yes, that's why we argued. But it appears that Lucas found a way to kill me at last. He accused me of being Dumbledore's man through and through. I really agreed with him. I told him I was. Dumbledore opened his mouth to speak, and then closed it again. Behind Harry, Fox the Phoenix let out a low, soft, musical cry. I would have loved to hear that in sounds. I bet it is beautiful. To Harry's intense embarrassment, he suddenly realized that Dumbledore's bright blue eyes were rather watery, and stared hastily at his own knees. When Dumbledore spoke, however, his voice was quite steady. I am very touched, Harry. Gryffindor wanted to know where you're going when I was Hogwarts, said Harry, still looking fixedly at his knees. Yes, he was very nosy about that, said Dumbledore, now sounding cheerful, and Harry thought it safe to look up again. Has even attempted to have me follow. Amusing, really. He said Dawlish to tell me. It wasn't kind. I have already been forced to meet Dawlish once. I did it again with great regret. So they still don't know where you go? Asked Harry, hoping for more information on this intriguing subject. But Dumbledore merely smiled at the top of his half-moon spectacles. No, they don't. And the time is not... no, they don't. And the time is not quite right for you to know either. No, I suggest we pass on. Unless there's anything else. There is actually some, said Harry. It's about Malfoy and Snape. Professor... oh, Harry. Yes, sir. I overheard them doing Professor Slughorn's party. Well, I feel them, actually. Dumbledore listened to Harry's story with an impassive face. When Harry finished, he did not speak for a few moments, then said, Thank you for telling me this, Harry, but I suggest you keep it out of your mouth. I do not think that it is of great importance. Not of great importance, repeated Harry incredulously. Professor, do you understand? Yes, Harry, just as I am with extraordinary brain power, I understood everything you told me, said Dumbledore unequivocally. I think you might even consider the possibility that I understood more than you did. Again, I am glad that you have confided with me, but let me reassure you that you have not told me anything that causes me to smile. Harry sat in soothing silence, glaring at Dumbledore. What was going on? Did this mean that Dumbledore had indeed ordered Snape to find out what Malfoy was doing, in case he already heard everything Harry just told him from Snape? Or was he really worried by what he heard, but pretending not to be? So, sir, said Harry in what he hoped was a polite, calm voice, you definitely still trust. I have been tolerant enough to answer that question already, said Dumbledore, but he did not sound very tolerant anymore. My answer has not changed. I should think not, said a snide voice. Phoenix Nidalis was evidently only pretending to be asleep. Dumbledore ignored him. And Lord Harry, I must insist that we press on. I have more important things to discuss with you this evening. Harry sat there feeling useless. How would it be if he refused to comment the change of subject, if he insisted upon arguing the case against Malfoy? As though he had read Harry's mind, Dumbledore shook his head. Harry, how often this happens, even between the best of friends. Each of us believes that what he has to say is much more important than anything the other might have to contribute. I don't think what you have to say is unimportant, sir, said Harry stiffly. You're quite right, because it is not, said Dumbledore briskly. I have 20 amendments to read this evening. Both obtained with enormous difficulty. And the second of them is, I think, the most important I have collected. Harry didn't say anything to this. He still felt angry at the reception his confidence was received, but couldn't see what was to be gained by arguing further. Yeah, that's probably good about Harry. So, said Dumbledore in a ringing voice, we meet this evening to continue the tale of Tom. When we left you Leston poised on the threshold of Caesar's hallway. You will remember how excited he was to hear that he was a wizard, but he refused my company on a fixed bag on island, and that I, in turn, warned him against continued thievery when he arrived at school. Yet, the start of his career arrived, and with it came Thomas, a fly-born second-hand rogue who lined up with the other first years himself. He was placed in something house almost the moment that the sorting hat touched his hand, continued Dumbledore, waving his blackened hand toward the shelf over his head where the sorting hat sat, ancient and unmoving. Watching little men have the things out of the house, could talk to snakes, I do not know. Perhaps that very evening, the knowledge can only have excited him and increased his sense of self-importance. However, it was frightening when Professor Fellow Slytherins, with springs across his head in their common no hint of it reached the staff. He showed no sign of outward elegance or personality. As an unusually talented and very good-looking orphan, he naturally drew attention and censure from the staff only from the moment surrounding him. He seemed polite, quiet, and thirsty for knowledge. Nearly all were most favorably impressed by him. Didn't you tell him, sir, what he'd been like when you met him at the orphanage? Asked Harry. No, I did not, but we had some notions of remorse, and it was possible that he felt sorry for how he behaved before, and was resolved to turn over a fresh leaf. I chose to give him that chance. Dumbledore paused and looked inquiringly at Harry, who opened his mouth to speak. Here again was Dumbledore's tendency to trust people in spite of overwhelming evidence that they did not deserve it. But then Harry remembered something. But you didn't really trust him, did you? He told me the riddle that came out of that Harry said Dumbledore never seemed to like me as much as the other teachers did. Let us say that I did not take it for granted that he was trustworthy, said Dumbledore. I had, as I have already indicated, resolved to keep a close eye upon him, and so I did. I cannot pretend that I gleaned a great deal from my observations at first. He was very proud of the game. He felt, I am sure, that in the thrill of discovering his true identity, it told me a little too much. He was careful to never reveal as much again, but he could not take back opening red sniff with his excitement. Knew what Mrs. Cole had confided in him. However, he had the sense to never try and charm me, as he charmed so many of my colleagues. As he moved up the school, he gathered about him a group of dedicated friends. I call them that for want of a better term, although as I have already indicated, Fiddle undoubtedly felt no affection for any of them. This group had a kind of dark glamour within the castle. They were a motley collection, a mixture of the weak seeking protection, the ambitious seeking some sad glory, the sluggish gravitating toward the neighbor, who could show them more refined forms of cruelty. In other words, they were the forerunners of the devil, and he knew some of them became first Death Eaters after leaving Hogwarts. Rigidly controlled by Riddle, they were never detected as open wrongdoing, although their 7 years at Hogwarts were marked by a number of nasty incidents, to which they were never satisfactorily linked, the most serious of which was, of course, the opening of Chamber of Secrets, which resulted in the death of a girl. As you know, Hagrid was strongly accused of that crime. And as you know, that girl is now Moody Myrtle. I've not been able to find many memories of Riddle Hogwarts, said Dumbledore, placing his withered hand on the peasant's. You who know him well are prepared to talk about him. They are too terrified. What I know, I found out after he left Hogwarts, after much painstaking effort, after tracing those few who could be tricked into speaking, after searching those records of twisting muggle and wizard witnesses alike. Those whom I could persuade to talk told me that Riddle was obsessed with his characters. This is understandable, of course. He had grown up in an orphanage and naturally wished to know how it came to be there. It seems that they searched in vain for some trace of Tom never seen, or Monsieur's new trophy room, and the lists of prefects in the old school records, even in the books of Wizarding history. Finally, he was forced to accept that his father had never set foot in Hogwarts. And even when it was done that he dropped the name forever, assumed the identity of Lord Voldemort, and began his investigations into his previously despised mother's family, the woman whom you will remember. He had not felt he wished that she had succumbed to the shameful human weakness of death. All he had to do upon was to simply name Marlborough, which he knew from those around the orphanage, had been his mother's father's name. Finally, after painstaking research through old books of different families, he discovered the existence of Slytherin's surviving line. In the summer of his 16th year, he left the orphanage too, but he returned annually and set off to find his relatives. And he knew Harry, if he will stand. Dumbledore rose, and Harry saw that he was again holding a small crystal ball that filled with swirling, silvery memory. I was very lucky to collect this, he said as he poured the gleaming mass into the heavens. As you will understand when you have experienced it, shall we? Harry stepped up to the stone basin and bowed obediently until his face sank through the surface of the memory. He felt a familiar sensation of falling through nothingness and then landed upon a 30-stone floor in almost complete darkness. It took him several seconds to recognize the place, by which time Dumbledore had landed beside him. Ron's house was now more indescribably filthy than anywhere Harry ever seen. The ceiling was thick with cobwebs, the floor coated in grime. Moldy and rotten food lay upon the keyboard. missed a massive trusted pot. Blue light came from a single guttering candle placed at the feet of a man with hair and beard so overgrown Harry could see neither eyes nor mouth. He was slumped in an armchair by the fire, and Harry wondered whether he was dead. But then there came a loud knock on the door, and the man jerked away, raising a wand in his right hand and a short knife in his left. The door creaked open. There on the threshold, holding an old-fashioned lamp, stood a boy Harry recognized at once. Tall, pale, dark-haired, and handsome. The teenage Voldemort. Voldemort's eyes moved slowly around the hovers, and then found the man in the armchair. For a few seconds they looked at each other. Then the man staggered upright, the many empty bottles at his feet clattering and tingling across the floor. "You!" he bellowed. "You!" And he hurtled directly at Riddle, wand and knife held aloft. "Stop!" Riddle spoke in crossing tones. The man skidded into the table, sending moldy pots crashing to the floor. He stared at Riddle. There was a long silence while they contemplated each other. The man broke it. "You speak it?" "Yes, I speak it," said Riddle. He moved forward into the room, allowing the door to swing shut behind him. Harry could not help but feel resentful admiration for Voldemort's complete lack of fear. His face merely expressed disgust, and perhaps disappointment. "Where's Marlborough?" he asked. "Dead," said the other. "5 years ago, didn't he?" Riddle frowned. "Who are you then? I'm an orphan, answer. Marlborough's son?" "Of course I am." Then Morgan pushed the hair out of his dirty face, the better to see Riddle, and Harry saw that he wore Marlborough's black stone ring on his right hand. "I thought you was that muggle," whispered Morgan. "Look why you like that muggle." "What muggle?" said Riddle sharply. "That muggle that my the muggle that my sister took a fancy to. The muggle that is in the back house over the way," said Morgan, and he spat unexpectedly upon the floor between them. "What? Like him, Riddle? Riddle. What are you talking about, isn't it? He's only no more. That's what I think, Anna." Morgan looked slightly dazed and swayed a little, still clutching the edge of the table for support. "He'll come back soon," he added stiffly. Voldemort was gazing at Morgan as though appraising his possibilities. Now he moved a little closer and said, "He'll come back. And he'd left her. So, and serve her right there himself," said Morgan, spitting on the table. "Dropped the sign before she ran off. Where's the locket, eh? Where's Slytherin's locket?" Voldemort did not answer. Morgan was working himself into a radiance. He brandished his knife and shouted, "Dishonor! Yes, you did that. And who are you coming here and asking questions about all that? You've run it. It's over." He looked away, staggering slightly, and Voldemort moved forward. And as he did so, an unnatural darkness fell, extinguishing Voldemort's lamp and Morgan's candle, extinguishing everything. Dumbledore's fingers closed tightly around Harry's arm, and they were soaring back into the present again. The soft golden light in Dumbledore's office seemed to dazzle Harry's eyes after that impenetrable darkness. at all, said Harry at once. What did you forget? What happened? Because Malfoy could not remember anything from that time onward, said Dumbledore, gesturing Harry back into his seat. When he awoke this morning, he was lying on the floor, quite early. My brother's bringing him home. Meanwhile, in the village of Little Penguin, Meg was running along the high street, screaming that there were 3 ponies lying in the drawing room of the house. Tom Riddle Sr., his mother, and his father. The mother authorities were perplexed. As far as I am aware, we do not know to this day how the riddle died, for the Avada Kedavra curse does not even need any sign of damage. The exception sits within me, Dumbledore added with a nod to Harry's scar. The ministry, on the other hand, knew at once that this was a different matter. They also knew that a convicted Malfoy hater was across the valley from the River House, a Malfoy hater who had already been imprisoned once for attacking one of the masked people. So the ministry called upon Malfoy. They did not need to question him. He appeared to say unanimously. He admitted to the murder on the spot, giving details only the murder itself. He was proud, he said. He killed nobles. Had been awaiting his chance of his youth. He handed over his sword, which was proved at once to have been used to kill the rebels, and he committed himself to the net of the Azkaban without a fight. All that disturbed him was the fact that his father's ring had disappeared. The king was mercenary. He told his captors over and over again. The king was lifting his ring. And that apparently was all he ever said again. He lived until a legal consent in Azkaban, lamenting the loss of Malfoy's last errand, and is buried beside the prison, alongside the other close not expired within its walls. So, Voldemort stole Malfoy's wand and used it, said Harry, sitting up straight. He's wrong, said Dumbledore. We have no memories to show us this, but I think we can be fairly sure what happened. Voldemort stupefied his uncle, took his wand, and proceeded across the valley to the big house over the way. Then he murdered the man who abandoned his first mother, and for good measure, his mortal grandparents, thus liberating the last of the unworthy little line, and revenging himself upon the father who never wanted him. Then he returned to the Grand Chapel, performed a complex bit of magic that would implant a false memory in his uncle's mind, made Malfoy's beside his unconscious owner, pocketed the ancient ring he wore, and departed. And Malfoy never realized he had done it. Never, said Dumbledore. He gave, as I say, a full and boastful confession. But he had this real memory in him all the time. Yes, but it took a great deal to feel the demons the coaxing out of him, said Dumbledore. And why should anybody go further into Malfoy's life when he already confessed to the crime? However, I was able to secure a visit to Malfoy in the last 3 weeks of his life, by which time I was attempting to discover as much as I could about Voldemort's past. I extracted this memory with difficulty. When I saw what it contained, I attempted to use it to secure Malfoy's release from Azkaban. Before the ministry reached their decision, however, Malfoy had died. But how come the ministry didn't realize it for a moment and let off Malfoy? Harry asked me. He was underage at the time, wasn't he? I guess they could detect underage magic. Well, clearly, they can detect magic, but not the perpetrator. You'll remember that you were blamed by the ministry for the other crime that was in fact cast by Dolphin, growled Harry, his son Justice still rankly. So if you're underage and you do magic inside an adult with a wizard's house, the ministry won't know. will certainly be unable to cope with the magic, said Dumbledore, smiling slightly at the look of great indignation on Harry's face. They rely on rich and wicked parents to enforce their offspring's obedience while within their walls. Well, that's rubbish, snapped Harry. What could happen here? What could happen to Morphin? I agree, said Dumbledore. Whatever Morphin was, he did not deserve to die as he did. Blamed for murder he had not committed, but it is getting there. And I would here to see this other memory before we part. Dumbledore took from an inside pocket another crystal vial, and Harry fell silent at once, remembering that Dumbledore had said it was the most important one he had collected. Harry noticed that the contents proved difficult to empty into the pensive, as though they had congealed slightly. Did the memories go bad? That's a good question. Do memories go bad before they put in pensive? This really makes me wonder. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. This will not take long, said Dumbledore, when he had finally emptied the vial. We shall be back before you know it. Don't finish the presents again. And Harry fell again through the silver surface, landing this time right in front of a man he recognized at once. It was a much younger Forest Slughorn. Harry was so used to him bald that he found the sight of Slughorn with thick, shiny, straw-colored hair quite disconcerting. It looked as though he had his head thatched, though there was already a shiny galleon-sized bald patch on his crown. His mustache, less massive than it was in those days, was gingery blonde. It was not quite as rotund as the Slughorn Harry knew, though the golden buttons on his richly embroidered waistcoat were taking a fair amount of strain. His little feet resting upon a velvet seat. He was sitting well back in a comfortable winged armchair, one hand grasping a small glass of wine, the other searching through a box of crystallized pineapples. For those who like pineapple, I think that's the treat for you. But for me, I have an allergy to pineapple, so out. Although now I wonder, can you crystallize watermelon? I'll get back to you on that next week. Harry looked around as Dumbledore appeared beside him and saw that they were standing in Slughorn's office. Half a dozen boys were sitting around Slughorn, all on harder or lower seats than his, and all in their mid-teens. Harry recognized Voldemort at once. His was the most handsome face, and he looked the most relaxed of all the boys. His right hand lay negligently upon the arm of his chair with the gold. Harry saw that he was wearing marble gold and black rings. He had already told his father. Sir, is it true that Professor Malfoy is retiring? He asked. Tom, if I knew I couldn't tell you, said Slughorn, wagging a reproving sugar-covered finger at Riddle, though wearing the effect slightly balancing. I must say I wish that I were to get more information, boy. I'm not knowledgeable than half you are. Riddle smiled. The other boys laughing past him admiringly. Oh, but you uncanny ability to make things sugar, and your careful laughing way of the people who matter. Thank you for the pineapple, by the way. You're quite right, it is my favorite. As several of the boys tittered, something very odd happened. The whole room was suddenly filled with thick white fog, so that Harry could see nothing but the face of Dumbledore, who was sitting beside him. Then Slughorn's voice ran out through the mist, and naturally loudly. You'll go wrong, boy. Mark my words. The fog cleared as suddenly as it had appeared, and yet nobody made any allusion to it. Nor did it anybody look as though anything unusual just happened. Bewildered, Harry looked around as a small golden clock standing upon Slughorn's desk chimed 11 o'clock. Good gracious, is that time already? Said Slughorn. We better get going, boys, or we'll all be in trouble. I'm straying. I won't show essay by tomorrow. It's detention. Same goes for you, Avery. Slughorn pulled himself out of his armchair and carried his empty glass over to his desk as the boys filed out. Voldemort, however, stayed behind. Harry could tell that he had stalled it deliberately, wanting to be last in the room with Slughorn. What's wrong, Tom? Said Slughorn, turning around and finding him sarcastic. You don't want to be caught out of hours. You're perfect. Sir, I wanted to ask you something. Ask away then, Malfoy. Ask away. Sir, I wonder what you know about Horcruxes. And it happened all over again. The dense fog filled the room so that Harry could not see Slughorn or Voldemort at all. Only Dumbledore, smiling serenely beside him. Then Slughorn's voice boomed out again, just as it had done before. I don't know anything about Horcruxes, but I wouldn't tell you if I did. Now get out of here at once, and don't let me catch you mentioning them again. Well, that's that, said Slughorn. Sorry, wrong professor, said Dumbledore placidly beside Harry. Time to go. And Harry's feet left the floor to fall, seconds later, back onto the rug in front of Dumbledore's desk. The trouble is, said Harry blankly, Dumbledore had said this was the most important memory of all, but he could not see what was so significant about it. Admittedly, the fog and the fact that nobody seemed to have noticed it was odd. But other than that, nothing seemed to have happened except that Voldemort had asked questions and failed to get an answer. As you might have noticed, said Dumbledore, reseating himself behind his desk, that memory has been tampered with. Tampered with? Repeated Harry, sitting back down too. Certainly, said Dumbledore. Professor Slughorn meddled with his own recollections. But why would he do that? Because I think he's ashamed of what he remembers, said Dumbledore. He has tried to relive the memories to show himself in a better light, obliterating these parts which he does not wish me to see. It is, as you will have noticed, very crudely done, and that is all to be said, for it shows that the true memory is still there beneath the restorations. And so for the first time I am giving you homework now. It will be our job to persuade Professor Slughorn to divulge the true memory, which will undoubtedly be our most crucial piece of information of all. Harry stared at him. But surely, sir, he said, keeping his voice as respectful as possible. You don't need me. You're very divinity. You're very strong. Professor Slughorn is an extremely intelligent who would be expecting both, said Dumbledore. He is much more accomplished at upping to them far more than Ron, and I would be astonished if he has not carried an antidote to bear to Sam with him. Ever since I coerced him into giving me this travesty of a recollection. No, I think it would be foolish to attempt to wrest the truth from Professor Slughorn by force, and might do much more harm than good. I do not wish him to lose progress. However, he has those weaknesses like the rest of us, and I believe that we are the one person who might be able to penetrate his defenses. It is most important that we secure the true memory, Harry. How important we will only know when we have seen the real thing. So good night, and good night. A little taken aback by the dismissal, Harry got to his feet. He said, "Good night, sir." As he closed the study door behind him, he distinctly heard Phineas Nigel say, "I can't see by the potion. Be able to do it better than you, Dumbledore." "I didn't expect you to, Phineas," replied Dumbledore, and Fox gave another musical cry. And that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for chapter 18, Birthday Surprises. And again, I hope you like the new brains. They're still gonna take some getting used to, but they're marking what I'm calling my Cabot era. But until next week, bye!